The Sleepers, Chapter 41, Double Deceit. Ray stormed into my office with his characteristic dramatic flare of distress. He slammed the door behind him, half flippantly, half with tense control. He wore a fresh lab coat over a ridiculously expensive suit. I really should have fixed the auto blinds to activate on his entry. Things have to change. They have to change soon. Can this wait till Chinese? I asked, not wanting to let Ray carry me through a midday, midlife emotional roller coaster. Ray's outburst had ceased to pique my interest. 1 day a week was enough for me. 5 days was just too much. Of course, he ignored me. I don't want to be president. I don't want to work at SleepFree. I've never wanted to work here. Ray's face bled desperation and disgust. I rejected what I love for that which I hate. I lost Gabby so that I could be the president. He slowed his voice for emphasis. I traded love for loathing. I quit that which I wanted for that which has been forced upon me. I want her back. I don't want this job or this life. I don't want another woman. I want Gabby, and I want out of here. He was so infuriating. Why couldn't he just make up his mind and live with the decision? Any decision. That simple. It seemed to be an endless cycle of passionate, dedicated effort, tricking me to almost admire him, followed by desperate anxiety about the red-headed wonder. This disruption called for damage control. Hold on, Ray. Calm down. Calm down. You love your work here. You came back from D.C. committed. You were just in my office drooling over our next moves. He was impatient with my reassurances. But nothing is happening. We are spinning our wheels, doing the same thing we always do. The SSC blocks any real change. And he faltered, I want to be anywhere but here. You know I was always meant for something else. This is not my life. Looking down at his clothes, as if they were symbolically his job and life, he swept his hands to shoo away this life. The tears came next. This isn't me. I majored in history. I minored in art. I am a right brain trapped in a left brain's world. I lost her and sacrificed everything else that matters. So much for getting my reports done today. I'd have to babysit my client. You also have a PhD in sleep science. Look, times will change, Ray. I comforted, trying to not sound too condescending. You liked your last role when you felt you were making a difference. Those times will return. But don't forget, you didn't just land on a solution there. You had to work. We're working here, so get back in it. And forget about Gabby. You made that decision. Move on. I wanted to shake him across the desk, but kept my near-boiling cool. You are the man to lead this company. Anyone can pursue history or art or any other hobby, but you have the mind and heart and blood to lead here. This is your gift, your birthright. As he complained more, I thought how I would do anything to lead this company. I would do anything to change the world. He had the power and wanted to shirk it for his selfish indecision. Don't give up, Ray. Times will change, and you'll be grateful to be the one leading. I needed Ray here. I could not deliver the Cumulus drug to another manager. Everything was too close to fail. I had dragged and swindled him into college. I had spent these years finding the antidote to sleep. I had sacrificed all that could matter for my purpose. What did Ray know of sacrifice? I could lie and cajole a little more to keep Ray in his place. He could not abandon this ship. Not now, no way. You talk with such faith in me and faith in this company. You have always believed in our mission. With begging implication, he looked pleading into my eyes. Why don't you lead? It could be you. It should be you. This has always been your passion, not mine. Because fate put us in the place with our own destinies. We are where we are supposed to be. You'll understand that eventually. He was relaxing, but still upset. I don't want to understand my purpose here. I want a new purpose. I want my true purpose, not some borrowed dream. I have to find meaning soon, or I'm gone. Forget my dad and his great family plans. Forget my grandfather's master plan. SleepFree was his destiny. I can choose my own destiny. I'm no one's puppet. Give it time, Ray. Life will change. Besides, with the plans of your father, I chuckled, you'll be out of this job in another year, and you have 10 more to finish before his retirement. Life will be too busy to feel remorse. Nodding to soothe the bits of tension, he turned to leave. Thanks, John. Thanks for calming me down. Take this. We'll keep you calm. I tossed in the ball that I kept on my desk just for him. With a forced smile and a deep sigh, he left through the door and gently closed it, forgetting his injustice to it minutes earlier. I called Jane immediately after his departure. Jane, I'm transmitting tonight, before it's too late. He needs to meet you in the next few weeks or else. Amidst 7 hours of noise and uncontrolled fragmentary dreams, I inserted the lucid string, a golden fleck shining like a beacon among a sea of gray dross. Upon download, his mind would find it, he would feel it, and he would fall for it. Consecutively adding and modifying small details, I dreamed of the race 3 times for Ray since his office outburst. Each time Jane won the race and earned the accolades of the other competitors. As the skipping stone inherits the historic trajectory of each previous splash, Jane became the natural end of Ray's whirling life, the final bounce. It was not, however, the predicted destination. It was not the natural path fate would choose for Ray, but the dream was meant to break fate and rewrite it at Ray's expense. The bounces would align, but only when viewed from the horizontal plane. Balancing fate and coercion, Jane and I decided to transmit the dream 3 times before her physical appearance. While Ray may have been a sucker for fate, events that were just too serendipitous could raise suspicion. I could not dream of Jane and have her appear in the same day, nor could I justify too many repeat lucid dreams without raising doubt over my reported low lucidity index. The mind could still surprise a client with absorbed and reprocessed dream data, but it was understandably rare. Even 3 times was dangerous, but the office interruptions and lunchtime discussions were spiraling faster than I could control, and I needed to act. Jane needed to act, and we didn't want to waste this first attempt cockily only dreaming once. The dream, the night, and the woman were flawless. It was not the gala night. She wore no charming gown, though she dressed up from the usual scrubs. No crowds of dispossessed feigned interest to the uninterested. Instead, the evening was uncomfortably cold, empty, and wet. A light drizzle painted pedestrians in melancholy. Ray had settled onto his gargoyle perch, a bench along the river directly across from the city. From this roost he could bow before man's creations, soaked by the humble mercy of God's power. He always finished his forlorn strolls at this bench before returning home. The weeks since he had ranted in my office and the year since breaking from Gabby had brought him more and more frequently to this spot. I knew he would be there, miserably soaking in the rain. I only had to show Jane the spot and let the dream work. She would find him staring across the river at the freckled city skyline on a Sunday night. Even in the sleepless culture of rediscovered America, Sunday was a business holiday. Pointless city lights from tall towers reflected on the fragmented water surface. Above, the structured puzzle of empty windows told tales of skyscrapers against the starless, cloudy night. Cast in the foreground, she would find Ray, a shadow transfixed by the flickers of the perturbed water. Into this wasteland, I sent my love.
She was going to need a hiatus soon from nighttime visits to park benches, but Jane had one more stop to make this evening. She knew she would find Ray at this bench, drenched and somber. John showed her the exact spot the previous night, careful to visit when Ray was still at home. The weather had been cloudless last night, and the sun had yet to fall below the horizon. But John had said, Ray prefers the hour of misery when rain clouds meet darkness. If there is rain, he will not miss being here. She laughed to herself before approaching. She only met men when completely orchestrated by a puppet master. Jane had endured all of John's explanations, plans, doubts, and rehearsals over and over since entering the devil's bargain. She would have abandoned any other such laborious relationship, but John's mission compelled her onward. Allured by John's father, she hired on for the mission. The whole mission. But then she fell in love and couldn't break away. As she approached Ray, Jane considered rebellion. In just seconds, she would be entering another lie, a double lie, burying herself deeper in hell. What started as changing the world had already destroyed her decency, thrown her into adoration and love at the point of a gun, forced her to abandon all principles, and ended her resolve to never borrow sleep. If she had thought through any of this when first sitting in that cursed office, Jane would have said no. But she didn't. This was a rotten deal that would only end in broken hearts and the end of the world. Not to be too dramatic. John's father probably prepared this area as well, clearing security for secrecy or hiring additional goons to ensure her success, perhaps afraid she would run. No one appeared to be lurking around the bench, just the one lonely figure, illuminated by a trustworthy street lamp. But John Jr. had a way of making things happen without anyone knowing. He certainly had fooled his son. She had pleaded desperately last night with John to find an alternative test, find another dream to prove his drug's efficacy. But even as she begged, she knew this was the right move. John needed a strong force to hold Ray at SleepFree Inc. until they could accomplish the ultimate mission. No test besides love could guarantee such binding power. Love worked on deceiving John and would easily work on Ray if he was anything like John described. Love would also prove John's creation, the penultimate example before they unleashed Cumulus. Last night, John ironically defended their love when entreating her to proceed. "What we have is real, Jane. You and Ray will be an act, a sham, not something like this." And he reached over to her heart and then back to his own. Perhaps the cheesiest thing he'd ever done, but he meant it. Jane shamefully agreed and surrendered. Of course, she felt terrible agreeing with him, knowing she was guilty of an identical crime. But she was helpless to stop this action. She wanted this revolution as much as John, and she had made a commitment to the puppet master. The lies hung over her head large as storm clouds, ever threatening and ominous. Seconds vanished as she closed the final distance to Ray. Soaked and sullen, he had unceremoniously discarded his umbrella at the side of the bench. It was a token of recognition of weather, not an instrument meant for relief. John had explained that Ray needed to feel the cold wetness. Penance required suffering. The inverted umbrella collected rain and mocked its owner's exposed, wet head. Jane could not look at umbrellas the same after having heard the same umbrella metaphor from father and son. But they had never described an upside-down umbrella. It seemed to signal the most pathetic of all creatures. Jane sighed. Last chance to turn around. She approached purposely from Ray's side, still within his periphery, and gracefully breached his disconsolate abode. Ray tried to ignore her presence as she claimed the open bench space. "Is this spot taken?" Jane asked, as if they were riding the commuter train. He dismissed her, still refusing to glance left, and replied with glum indifference. "Be my guest, but the seat's wet." Seating herself, she could not resist exercising her mocking charm, especially on such a pitiful creature. "Seems like the perfect place to be miserable. Great view, great rain, great loneliness. Hope I'm not interrupting your solitude too much." "No," sighed Ray, unwilling to indulge in conversation, but definitely interested in Jane's rapidly drawn conclusions. This would be too easy. "Good. Misery does love company. I think I'll stay for a while." The odd, merriful tone from a stranger willing to engage in shared misery finally evoked enough interest in Ray to turn his head while saying, "You don't sound miserable enough to want this spot." Ray stopped speechless. There she sat, smartly clutching her umbrella, poised with penetrating eyes, flirtatious lips, and shivering nose. He was snared in one look. She should have pursued acting. Recovering from shock, Ray blundered through a much-needed introduction while trying to straighten his disheveled appearance. My name's Ray. Nice to meet you, Jane extended her free hand. I'm Jane. His face betrayed everything, and she knew immediately the dream had worked. She knew that Ray wanted to ask if they had met before, but it had been a dream, and he choked on his own question before asking. Instead, Ray paused and thought for a quiet moment, likely reliving and remembering every detail of the lucid transfer. Then, standing up, he bravely asked, Would you like to go inside and get a drink? I thought you'd never ask. Then with a laugh, she added, It is quite wet out here. Ray extended his hand, lifting Jane from the bench and the gloom, and she took it unafraid.
Chapter 42. The One. Ray's entire existence hung on one moment. A man can deceive himself into knowing 1,000 times that this girl's the one, until finally he knows, no deceit necessary. Such was this moment. Ray's entire splash vector pointed to one girl. There could be no more skips for this man. The rock's momentum had vanished. He needed sympathy, a support to keep him going, perhaps another mother. He needed a soft-hearted, kind-spoken country girl. He needed healing for Samantha, and a shoulder for Gabby, kindness and empathy for so many others, and so on. An entire litany of needs sprung from the history of splashes. Rippling waves in space left innumerable, indelible imprints of emptiness. Just one girl could satisfy that splash, and it was not Jane. But he didn't know it, and he would never piece it together. All that mattered was that he recognized her, not from some past experience or chance encounter, but from my dream, his dream, and his subconscious. Somewhere he already knew, or had been taught to know, that she was the one, the answer and the conclusion. His soul knew it and could not lie. He shook off the rain and misery, the weariness of dark thoughts. The dream had worked. I learned first from Jane that Ray had fallen for the bait, an observation I could have easily deduced from his sudden transformation at work. The gloom vanished, and his effervescence returned. Each day since their first meeting, Jane delivered the daily Ray report during our ever-shrinking time together. Her second relationship reduced our time down to 1 hour or less a day. I managed 2 clients. She managed 2 lovers. With each breakup, and subsequent I told you so for me, Ray delayed how quickly he would let me in on his extremely obvious secret of a new girl, embarrassed by broken promises to never date again. Gabby took 2 weeks of intimacy. With Jane, it took 3 weeks before he let me in on the news. Ray entered my office, never quite learning that one should knock first. Tossing my borrowed ball back to me, he started, You can take this back now. Everything has changed. Like a lovesick puppy, Ray then spilled forth a monologue of infatuation and dazzling adjectives, which I painfully endured. His presence filled my office as he paced, slouched in every chair, and even pushed my stuff aside on the desk so he could lock my attention at close quarters. At least the Chinese restaurant protected me with a bit of decorum and a grimy table between us. Finally, he concluded, She's everything I have ever wanted, John. Absolutely everything. I murmured agreement, partially to reflect my typical skepticism, and partially because even I, a man in love with Jane, could not bear a minute more of such sappy language. She was incredible. But how could a man, having known her only 3 weeks, feel so compelled to pour out so many descriptors? He looked at me slightly hurt. How can you always sit there and judge me? You who have never loved or been in love. How would you know what is real? This is it. I know it this time. Ray, you have promised me, even sworn on your life, that this is it, so many times that I can't believe you. I would be a gullible fool to trust your heart compass. Besides, just a few weeks ago you were still whining about Gabby and committed to bachelorhood. I know, but you're wrong. I know that I have said the same things before, but Jane is different. I knew she was it the moment I saw her. She is straight from my dreams. I get so little dream content clearly, but her face is a remarkable match. She embodies everything from everyone I have ever liked, possessing all that I need, want, and love. Unlike the rest, I will not lose her, and I do not think she wants to be lost." This was Ray's first time mentioning the dream, and my interest returned. I had hoped, or suspected, he would doubt the dream as mine, but he thankfully claimed full responsibility. Lucid control worked. I changed subjects, always wanting to drive Ray to the next mission. "Well, if you have the girl, what's next for your sleep-free career? Just a few weeks ago, you were ready to quit and start the life you have always wanted but never dared chase. Will she run away with you to start fresh?" The smile forming on his face was the outward manifestation of his mind as he pictured Jane and her persistent rightness. Jane convinced me otherwise. My face betrayed skepticism. Dismissing my disbelief with a waving hand, he added, "Not in any sort of power-hungry, I want to marry the president way. In fact, she said nothing about my job or my future. Instead, she told me about her students." His eyes rolled left in teary contemplation. "She's a teacher, you know." Jane was too independent even for me to control. This had been an unsanctioned mission, but her cleverness reaped its reward. Was I the apprentice in manipulation? "She teaches poor sleeper children. The city's saddest fill her classroom. She told me how weary they are, squeezing work, school, and personal sleep into a single day. The task might be manageable, but they can't wake up from sleep like adult sleepers. The wake-up drugs perform poorly among children, promotes hyperactivity or sudden spin-out. So most parents only prescribe the sleep drug, meaning the kids all enter school tired and dreamy." Ray shook his head in disgust, surprised by his own words. "Why didn't I ever think about any of this? Did you know?" I cocked one eyebrow in sarcastic shock and disapproval. "Have you forgotten, Ray? Have I always been an adult? Or do you simply forget that I suffered like these children?" "But you always came to school ready to learn. You always appeared so attentive and unaffected. We fought for the highest mark every day." I surrendered without fight. Today was not the day. I was too close. I answered in modest pity. "You remember how bad those other kids were at our school? I wanted to be tough, Ray. I wanted to be like everyone else, so I faked it." Disgrace morphed into shame. "Well, I'm going to change the drug," responded Ray. "We are going to change the drug. We will find a better sleep cocktail, one that won't leave the children or the adults or any sleeper stuck in a stupor and needing yet another drug. This is why I stayed. I have my purpose now. I nearly found a replacement for sleepers. I should be able to reduce some side effects. She found me, and I have found myself." What a remarkable woman. Perhaps Jane did deserve all those accolades Ray, and the Dream Racers, poured forth. She'd jumped ahead in our plans and prepared him to reevaluate our drug cocktail. I motioned, raising my water bottle to toast Ray. "Sounds like a good plan. I support you and your new woman." Twice I fell in love, but as with sleep, I could not extricate myself from Ray. He and I loved the same woman twice, once by accident and once by design. Samantha and Jane, diametric opposites. Outside of my mentors, these two represented my only true human connections. Samantha and Jane lived life. One employed a sleeper, the other mourned the existence of sleepers. One leached life with scorn, the other fought scorn with empathy. But they both lived. They rejected society, and with impudence opposed the order and rules America tyrannically imposed. As whole creatures, they embodied the beauty of the ancients. Aristotle would have loved these two very different individuals. As half creatures, split by the perversity of borrowed sleep, Ray and I found our first encounters with Samantha maddening. Men with half souls covet whole women. They are a vision to us of indescribable, impossible beauty. Our souls yearn for the balm they alone possess, a salve Samantha chose not to dispense, and in the case of Jane, a healing Ray would never have found without artifice. And what attraction united these whole wonders of womanhood, these antonyms of affection with us, two half-creatures struggling for completion? It is pure myth, self-denial, or vain optimism to believe such complete women truly want half-soul men. They may fall for the incomplete, believing they, like the schoolgirl who saves the wounded bird, can mend that which is broken. But they will finish with whole lovers, having healed their man or having discarded him for someone better. In our case, Sam and Jane found a whole creature, the complete ideal, in the mixture of Ray and me. But infuriatingly, neither of us would suffice alone, and neither of us could be made whole.